I'm headed out in a little bit to meet up with some friends, but before we do that, I wanted to share something with you. I wanted to talk about this camera. Or not this camera exactly, but the version 2 of this camera, or the Canon R5 Mk II. The Canon R5 has been my main shooter for the last almost 2 years now, and if you haven't seen my review of it, you can check it out up here. But there are some things with this camera that I wish I could change. So I'm gonna break that down into things that I think the next version of this camera will get, things that I wish it would get, and then kind of like my personal wish list of crazy features that if I could add anything to this camera, those are the things that I would want to add. And before I get to my list, I want to know from you, what do you want to see in the next Canon R5 Mk II or whatever Canon decides to call their next camera? Leave that down in the comments down below. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna slip down this. Very precarious right now. Some of the features that I believe we will get on a future Canon R5 Mk II or on whatever camera Canon releases next are pretty much all the features right now that are on the Nikon Z8. If you look at the price point of those cameras, they're very similar. Obviously the Z8 is newer. It has 8K 60. I'd also like a 1080p 240 frames per second. I think that's something that makes sense to include, especially because it's already in a lot of Sony cameras. Unlimited record times for sure, because we have that on the R6 Mk II. That camera also has a decimal shutter speed, so you can set exactly, like if you want 1/48 or 1/48.5, you can set that right in your video mode. The Canon R5 introduced the 400 megapixel IBIS stitch mode, and while it's awesome, the fact that it's only in JPEG is really a deal breaker. I would expect that any camera going forward that has that feature to have it in a raw photo mode. And last but not least is a smart hot shoe, or a multi-function hot shoe. One of the things that's really challenging, even right now while I'm recording, the microphone on the top of the camera goes into the side of the camera, and depending on where you're sitting, it actually blocks a portion of the screen. So it would be really nice to to not have that cable, and then just run all of your audio, all of your power, anything you need for your microphone right from that multifunction hot shoe. I don't know if you can see, Rich just wandered onto the waterfall. So I'm gonna try shooting him with a 70 to 200 to see if the photo looks good. Slight change of plans. I'm making my way towards Rich. I do not recommend this path just because it's a little bit precarious, but we're going right into the waterfall, so it's about to get loud. What did you find?
I found a hole.
Rich says he found a hole. Let's see if we can.
My foot got stuck. Doesn't look like it, right? Look how deep this goes.
Yeah, don't step there. Oh my gosh, it is so cold. It's pretty cold.
It's not that cold.
I think I see Stefano. Is that Stefano over there?
Yeah. It doesn't look like it, right? I fell in like this much. My leg hurts now.
We just stepped out of the water and cleaned our shoes after getting into the water, but now we just gotta go for it. Such is the hardship of outdoor adventuring. Oh yeah, this is really muddy. Are you worried about dying?
Me?
Yeah.
I almost died last weekend hiking, and I won't die this weekend.
I do recommend being responsible when you're out hiking. There are dangerous things that can happen, so if you do end up climbing up the side of a cliff where a waterfall is, just take it slow and steady.
Park Ranger Gugliotta over here.
Apparently I'm the park ranger. I mean, the Parks Canada Rangers do wear green. I've got the green pants that pretty much look exactly like what they wear. All right, now I'm putting the camera away because this is way too dangerous to do with the camera.
Hi, how are you? Is this how you do it?
Oh,
Do you feel lucky to be here?
Absolutely.
You gotta point at the side.
This is 3 Italians in a row.
You know that the flavor of ice cream with the 3, like the strawberry.
Napolitano?
Yeah.
I think.
So that's like us.
Or Neapolitan for the English speakers in the room.
That's right. So what flavor are you?
I feel like I'm vanilla. I gotta be chocolate.
All right, I like strawberry. That works.
There you go.
That totally works. Now, when it comes to features that would be nice to have, but I probably don't think will be included with the Canon R5 Mark II, the big one is pretty much what the Nikon Z8 has, which is a compressed raw video format. So if you know anything about the Nikon versus Red lawsuit, is basically that Nikon started using a compressed version of raw video, which Red has a copyright patent to, and it led to a lawsuit. But they dropped the lawsuit, and Nikon is allowed to continue using that compressed video format. One thing we're seeing a lot now with higher-end cameras is the ability for the sensor to read out really fast. I do think that eventually we'll get to cameras that get rid of the mechanical shutter and just have a global shutter. One way to achieve that would be through something like a stacked sensor so that it does indeed read out faster. Will we get a stacked sensor on the R5 Mark II? I don't know. A weird one is the IBIS wobbles. That's something that a lot of people comment on when they see Canon footage. I'd love to see some way implemented that you can maybe disable the in-body image stabilization so that you only use the in-lens image stabilization, but I don't think we're gonna do that because right now the way the lenses work and the in-body image stabilization work is all kind of just one system. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but the Sony a7R5 has this really awesome tilty flippy screen that not only flips out, but it flips up and out to the side, which is really handy if you're trying to avoid any interference with the microphone jack, or if you have a rig where, you know, having it just out to the side isn't quite good enough.
I don't think they allow filming here.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't bring my good camera. I'm like, I'll just bring an iPhone. I've made videos my entire life. I was always against vertical video, always wanted the cool camera, and this is what I have found success with. iPhone cinematic mode with the light.
Before we end, there are 3 really specific features that I would absolutely love to see in a Canon R5 Mark II. The first is that in 4K, 120 frames per second, you can only record to one card. You can only record to the CF Express Type B cards because SD cards simply aren't fast enough. With the Canon R5, if you switched into trying to shoot 120 frames per second and you're in dual record mode, it actually won't let you hit record. So you have to go into the custom menu, change the settings, set it to a single card, and then you can record. It'd be a lot better if the camera just automatically detected that and changed that setting for you. I have a huge gripe with auto white balance. In photo mode, it doesn't matter so much because in RAW, afterwards, you go into Lightroom and it will tell you what the auto white balance what detected was. But in video mode, it'll just say auto white balance and you don't actually know what it's detecting. So what I would love is if right under the AWB icon, it actually just told you, hey, we're detecting 5600 Kelvin or 2700 Kelvin or whatever color temperature plus the magenta green tint so that you can decide for yourself, is this a setting that I want or do I want to set it custom for myself? It's just one of those nice to have features that would make it easier when you're shooting video. I also mentioned that one of my favorite features with the Canon R5 is the fact that you have all of these custom modes. Like you have all of these custom modes under video where you can just set all of your settings. So if you want a 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, a 60 frames per second, you can just set it all there so you can change really quickly. But the challenge is that it registers all of your settings, including the white balance. So if I'm in, custom mode 1 and I go and I set, okay, my white balance is gonna be daylight or whatever I wanna set it to, and then I switch over to the other custom mode, it will just remember whatever it was that was was registered when I set that setting. Ideally, what you want is to be, if you're in a run and gun setup, is, you know, I'm shooting 24 frames per second, I set my white balance, I switch to the next mode, it remembers my white balance, but then changes all the other settings like shutter and ISO and whatnot. And then lastly, a very photo-specific function that I would love to see that I do believe the 5D Mark IV had is when you're in photo mode, when shooting in JPEG, for example, you have large, which is 8K, you have medium, which is like a 6K, and then if you go all the way down to small, you have a 4K image. I'd love it if there was like a 24 megapixel equivalent RAW, so that when I'm shooting with my R6 Mark II and my R5, that both of those photos can be the same, like 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. Just a small gripe, but something to think about.